Uh, This chapter, or this unit here that we're starting on, begins with this chapter on interest groups. And interest groups, as we will see, are an example of a linkage institution. So we'll talk about what we mean by linkage institutions today. We'll look at interest groups, of course, what they are and the main types of interest groups that we find that exist out there. There's kind of 5 basic types. We'll look at what are the important elements of an interest group, what makes them successful, why people want to join interest groups, and we'll definitely talk about what interest groups do to try to influence elections and to increase participation among their members. We'll talk about lobbying and lobbyists as they attempt to influence Congress, the president, the bureaucracy, and the courts, kind of all different branches of government. And of course talk about what makes them successful. Okay, other questions that you have before we begin, maybe from the reading or from the video, anything like that? Okay, what do we mean by linkage institutions? Linkage institutions are those things that help to connect the people to their government. We kind of think of them as being like a middleman in that process. So when people sometimes try to contact their government representatives, they can do that individually. How successful might they be individually in contacting their legislator? Pretty successful. They're going to get a reply if they send a message. But how to heart do you think that legislator might take it if it's an individual contacting them? Or if it is a collection of individuals that can reach out and make their voices heard, which is what linkage institutions attempt to do. So examples of different linkage institutions that we have are interest groups, which is our topic today, political parties, which is, guess what, our next chapter, and campaigns and elections, which, guess what, is the chapter after that. Okay, so each of these chapters that we're looking at represent a different group that helps connect people to their government, that middleman in the process. Now, in return, can the government also use the same middlemen to get messages and to get information back to the people? Yes, so these arrows kind of work in both of these different directions. So today's focus, though, is on these things we call interest groups. And we'll see next time how they differ from political parties. However, it is said by some political scientists that perhaps linkage institutions are not as important as they used to be. Why do you think that might be? In other words, why might the effectiveness of interest groups or political parties or campaigns and elections be diminishing? Take a moment, think about those, jot down some ideas, type them onto Pear Deck. If you want to ask the person next to you what we mean by linkage institution, because you didn't get it from what I said, then you could do that right now too. One person sharing an idea. How about those of you jotting down something? Here we have bipartisanship and a growing dislike for ideas against the government. They can be annoying and negative. That might turn some people off and take them out of that system altogether of communication. Think about this, perhaps, if you're kind of getting stuck on an idea or so. If I go back to this image right here, is there now a medium? Is there now a way that perhaps our government can communicate directly with people by perhaps bypassing some of these different things right here? How does our president seek to communicate directly to the people and bypass interest groups or political parties? Using Twitter. Okay? Is social media one of these things that might be contributing to a lack of effectiveness of some of these political or these linkage institutions? Does Trump need the Republican Party if Trump can communicate directly to the people that he wants to, for example? Okay? And can it also be used the other direction as well? If maybe political parties aren't becoming as necessary because we have individuals that don't have to rely on the party to get their messages out, that might mean then that the campaigns that are being run might be a little bit more ineffective as well. Okay, so interest groups, they are linkage institutions. What interest groups try to do is to make demands on government and try to influence policy. So policy is what the government decides to do or not to do. So the way that you then try to influence government, you can do that as an individual, but we oftentimes find that there is greater strength in numbers. And the more people that you can show are part of that same interest group that you are part of, the more likely government will be to act upon those things, to try to make changes, to try to influence those people that are in government and those people that want to be in government. So they're oftentimes used to help lobby them, to convince them that your positions on issues are important. But they also try to get elected people that are already supporters of their views. By putting into office people that already support your views, are they going to then be more likely to act upon what the interests of those groups happen to be? Okay? If you are an ardent gun supporter, you get the support of the NRA to help you get elected people that are also ardent gun supporters. Correct? And then will those people work to make policy that helps to protect the rights of gun owners? Yes. Could you make the same cases for other issues? Could they be about healthcare or about education or about Social Security or about taxes? There are interest groups, or about the environment. There are interest groups about all of those different types of issues that are out there on which government makes policies. The other thing that interest groups try to do is recruit people, because they know that the larger their membership, the more likely their interests will be listened to. So if the Sierra Club can show that they have 5 million members, might government be more willing to listen to them if they know that the Sierra Club represents the views of 5 million environmentalists, more so than just 5 million individuals, but a collective group? Okay, so then the interest groups also then tried to convince their memberships, hey, this person is better on the environment, you should vote for that person. Or this person might be more of a supporter of gun rights, therefore you should vote for that person. The better the interest group is at mobilizing their membership and recruiting new members to belong to them, the more successful they'll be in trying to influence those policies that government makes. There are generally 5 different types of interest groups. Okay, and generally you want to be familiar with what they are and what types of groups belong to each. And these are the same ones discussed in your book. The public interest groups are those that are have widely accepted concepts of what is generally thought of as being good by a society or by a large segment of it. There is this group called Public Citizen, who was started by Ralph Nader a long, long time ago, that really tries to point out products or things in the marketplace that might be causing people lots of harm. It was this group that back in like the 1960s or 1970s were pointing out the problems with cars that were getting involved in crashes at speeds of as little as like 15 miles an hour, and the car would burst into flames. Okay, very bad thing, so it was a poorly designed thing. So we relied upon this group, Public Citizen, to point that out to the government, who then brought it to the attention of the automobile manufacturers, who said we need to change this and we need to make higher safety standards common in all types of cars that get produced. Okay. Then we have those that are economic in nature, the ones that are trying to focus around business or labor or even professional groups. What falls into this would be unions, labor unions. The most well-known and probably the largest labor union in the country is the AFL-CIO, which stands for American Federation of Labor Congress of International, I forget what that CIO part is. But they represent the interests of many different groups of unions, and as such carry a lot of influence, because if you are a member of a union, and there are millions of them, they can collectively say you need to watch out for the interests of the worker, or make sure that there are certain safety standards met in the workplace, or they work to argue for better wages for people as well. We have professional ones. These are going to advocate for a particular profession in general. For example, we have the AMA, which stands for the American Medical Association. Who do you think they're going to advocate on behalf of as a group of workers? Who? Doctors, right? Medical professionals. Okay, but they can also be for social groups of people as well, such as the NAACP, which is one of the oldest continuous interest groups in the country, began in the early 1900s, which stands for the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, which argues fervently about rights for minority groups, especially African Americans. Other professional groups might be that we have a group of attorneys that belong to a group. You know what theirs is called? They're the ABA, or the American Bar Association, which is not a group of tavern owners. Why would they call the group of attorneys the American Bar Association? Nope, good guess though. They don't put you behind, well, some of them do. Some of them try to keep you from getting behind bars. What's the name of the big test that you have to get in order to get your license to practice law? Bar exam. It's called the bar exam. So that's kind of where that comes from. We have groups that take a very ideological stand on different issues. They could be liberal, they could be conservative, they could be somewhere in between. We have the National Right to Life Council, which is very pro-life, and we have NARAL, which is very pro-choice. I can't ever remember what that one stands for. But two groups on opposite sides of the spectrum over the issue of abortion. We also have some groups that would be considered single-issue ones. You could perhaps say that these two, in addition to being ideological, might also be single issue. But another example of a single issue one would be MAD, which stands for... This one is Mothers Against Drunk Driving. There's also a student version of this group. It's called SAD. Okay. That take that issue of drunk driving and try to convince government to do things like lower the blood alcohol rates and increase punishments for those that are found guilty of drunk driving offenses in order to try to reduce future instances of that. Okay, so some of these groups could fall into more than one category. Some of them, nope, this is just the one that they're in. Okay. Questions on the types of interest?